He arrived without warning. The sound of tires on gravel outside, the slam of a car door, and then his silhouette framed in the hallway like a scene I had seen once in a memory. I recognized the voice first, deeper than before, steadier. Years had passed since he last lived under our roof. He had left a boy, returned a man. No one had warned me how unsettling that transformation would be. He said it casually, as if nothing had changed. Just for a few weeks. Need to get back on my feet. My husband, always eager to help, was already carrying in his bags, suggesting dinner plans, smiling that proud, oblivious smile. I stood back, arms folded, watching the shape of his shoulders beneath the worn gray shirt, the way his eyes moved too slowly over the room before landing on me. There was something in that pause. Or maybe I imagined it, I tried not to notice. I had grown good at suppressing the parts of myself that felt too much. After all, I had a solid marriage, safe, predictable. We didn't argue. We shared wine on weekends, but the touches had grown mechanical, the compliments rare. I missed being seen, not acknowledged, not thanked, but seen, like a woman, like someone still capable of stirring hunger. That first evening was uneventful, in the way tension hides beneath rituals. We set the table. He asked polite questions. I poured wine, the three of us laughed at old stories, and I felt for a moment like we were part of something warm and undamaged. Later, my husband went to bed early, work tomorrow, always early, and I stayed to clean the kitchen. He came in silently, shirt untucked, hair a little wet from his shower. He poured himself water but didn't leave. Instead, he leaned against the counter and asked about my job, my routine, my days. Nothing special in his words. But the way he listened, so still, so unwavering, unsettled me. It wasn't flirtation, it was observation, a kind I hadn't felt in years. "You always light candles at night?" he asked, nodding toward the small flame flickering beside. "The sink," I shrugged. "Just habit." He smiled, slow and quiet. "It's nice, makes things feel like someone lives here?" His words hung in the air like steam on the kitchen tiles. I couldn't respond without revealing something, so I said nothing. I turned off the faucet, dried my hands too long, and walked past him toward the hallway. Felt his eyes on my back the entire way up the stairs, and I didn't hate it. In bed that night, beside a man I'd shared half my life with, I couldn't stop thinking about a glance that lasted a second too long. It wasn't desire I felt. Not yet. It was awareness. As if part of me, dormant and starved, had stretched in its sleep and inhaled something dangerous. Morning would come. Coffee would be made. Schedules would resume. But the quiet had shifted. Something subtle but irreversible. And he was just down the hall. It started with fabric. The soft press of silk against skin. The weightless slide of lace beneath a sweater. I chose my outfit with the same indifference I always had, but paused longer than usual at the drawer where the delicate things lived, the ones I used to wear when I wanted to feel something. I pulled out the pale gray set. Simple, expensive, almost forgotten. It felt like a quiet dare. Downstairs, the morning light painted the kitchen in gold. He was already there, barefoot, hair still damp, making eggs like he had always lived there. My husband had left early again, kissing me on the forehead as I pretended to be asleep. I watched the boy, no, the man, move through our shared space with a kind of casual grace I hadn't remembered. His voice was lower, movements slower. Every now and then, his eyes met mine and didn't flinch away. Not curious, not shy, just present. We ate in near silence. I kept my focus on the food, but my body buzzed with the knowledge of itself. The brush of the chair against my thighs, the coolness of the table's edge against my arm. I couldn't help but wonder if he noticed, if he felt the shift. 2. He didn't speak much, just a few questions about the day ahead, then a quiet thanks before disappearing upstairs. The rest of the day blurred. I tried to distract myself with emails, laundry, even called a friend I hadn't spoken to in months, but I kept thinking about that moment at the table, how his gaze had rested on my collarbone when I leaned forward. I tried to tell myself it was accidental, but I didn't quite believe it. That night, my husband suggested we watch a movie. but then got caught up in a phone call that lasted over an hour. He waved me off from the couch with a tired smile. I ended up watching alone, legs tucked under me, wine glass in hand. Halfway through, he came down. Not the man I married. The other one. He didn't ask if he could sit. He just did. The space between us on the couch was deliberate. Not close, not far, safe, until it wasn't. At one point, I reached for the blanket draped over the armrest, and my hand brushed his knee. A nothing gesture, a practical one. But I froze, and he didn't move, didn't apologize, didn't flinch. The air between us grew dense, heavy. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. When I stood up to leave, he stood too. We were too close, breath close. I turned to say goodnight, to offer a polite smile and disappear into safe routines. But his face was right there. His eyes were level with mine, and then it happened. Not rushed, not reckless. It wasn't even a kiss, not really. More like a question. His lips brushed my cheek, but the angle, the pause, the warmth lingering at the edge of my mouth. It was enough. I stepped back. He didn't follow. I didn't scold him. He didn't explain. In the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror. My lipstick had faded. My skin was flushed. My heart beat where his mouth had almost touched. I washed my face with cold water as if I could undo the moment, as if it hadn't awakened something that had been sleeping under my skin for years. Later, in bed, my husband mumbled something in his sleep and turned toward me. His hand found my waist, warm and familiar. I let it rest there. I even reached for it. But my body didn't respond. Not with revulsion, just stillness. I closed my eyes and saw the flicker of candlelight on his jaw, the angle of his neck when he leaned in. I wondered if he regretted it. If he lay awake in that room just down the hall, thinking about the same 30 seconds of silence that had shattered our boundaries. It hadn't been a kiss, but it wasn't. Nothing. And I didn't want to forget it. I told myself I had imagined it. The way his eyes lingered, the warmth of his breath, the tilt of his head before that almost kiss. I told myself it was a misstep, a blur of proximity and poor timing. But lies like that only hold for a while. Eventually, your body calls you out. I tried to fix things, not the situation. We hadn't done anything, not really. But the sensation that had started growing inside me like a second skin. I needed to feel grounded again, needed to believe I was still centered in the life I had chosen. So I planned something I hadn't done in months, a proper dinner for just the two of us. My husband and I, no screens, no distractions, just music, wine, a nice meal and me, done up like I used to be. I chose the burgundy dress with the thin straps and low back, the one he had once whispered compliments about in an elevator. I curled my hair, added the perfume he used to like. The scent hit me like a wave of nostalgia I didn't want to admit I'd missed. Beneath it all, silk again. The same set from that morning, because I needed to believe that I still had the power to be desired, especially by the man who used to crave me. He came home late, distracted, something with a contract. He kissed my cheek and complimented the food, not me. Throughout dinner, I watched his eyes move from his phone to his plate and back again. I asked him how he'd been sleeping. He asked me if I'd paid the gas bill. I laughed at something, he said, but it echoed oddly. The distance between us wasn't physical, but it was vast. When he finally looked at me, really looked at me, it lasted barely a breath. I waited for his fingers to brush my wrist, for his knee to tap mine under the table, for anything that would signal, I see you. But all I got was a distracted, thanks for this, it's nice, as if I'd just rearranged furniture. That night, we went to bed without touching. He drifted off quickly, his breathing turning steady and soft. I stared at the ceiling, wondering when affection had become administrative. I shifted slightly, and his hand landed on my hip, out of habit, not intention. I didn't move it. I just lay there, rigid, my body unwilling to soften. His touch felt distant, like someone brushing lint from a coat. Morning light hadn't yet broken when I slipped out of bed. I wrapped myself in a robe, stepped into the hallway, and padded silently toward the kitchen. He was already there, Not my husband. The other one. He stood at the sink, pouring water into the kettle. No shirt, pajama pants, hair tousled. He didn't startle when he saw me. "You looked different last night," he said softly, not turning around. I paused by the fridge, fingers frozen on the handle. I didn't respond. My silence wasn't avoidance. It was surrender. What was I supposed to say? That I'd tried to feel wanted and failed? That I had dressed up for one man and couldn't stop thinking about another? When I finally sat at the table with my coffee, he slid into the seat across from me. We didn't speak again. We didn't have to. The room felt charged, as if even our breathing had rhythm. I saw the way his eyes caught on the edge of my collarbone, how he studied the line of my neck when I sipped. I felt more naked in that robe than I ever had undressed. Before he left the kitchen, he placed his cup in the sink and said, "If you want company this weekend, I was thinking we could check out that store downtown. You always said you hated shopping alone." He wasn't smiling. He wasn't teasing. He was offering something. Not romance, not confession, just time, a shared space, and I didn't say no. Saturday came quicker than I expected. I told my husband we were going shopping, just the two of us. He didn't ask questions. He rarely did these days. I said his son needed help picking out a few things. He nodded, mumbled something about taking care of some calls, and left the room. I lingered by the window longer than necessary, watching him back his car out of the driveway and vanish down the road. The silence that followed felt thick, like humidity before a storm. I didn't rush to get dressed. I took my time, chose a fitted beige sweater, one that hugged just enough, paired with jeans that shaped my legs the way I used to like. Underneath, I wore a new bra. Delicate slate blue, smooth beneath the fabric. Something about it made me stand taller. Not for him, not even for the one I was meeting, for myself, maybe. Or the version of me I used to miss. He was already waiting in the car when I stepped outside, one hand on the steering wheel, eyes hidden behind sunglasses, music playing low. When I opened the door, he reached over and turned the volume down. Neither of us said much on the drive. We didn't need to. The air inside that car was already dense with what we weren't admitting. The store was downtown, a place I hadn't visited in months. He made a show of pretending not to know what he wanted, pulling jackets from racks and holding them up for my approval. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in days when he tried on something absurdly oversized and posed like a model. It felt light, stupid, even. And then the moment shifted again. He asked if I could help him fix the collar on a coat. He was trying on. I stepped behind him, reaching up, adjusting the fabric, brushing his shoulders. The space between us dissolved in seconds. I could smell him. Clean skin, faint cologne, something familiar but newly masculine. My fingers grazed the nape of his neck, and he didn't move. Neither did I. I just stood there, his back against my chest, heartbeat pressing through both our clothes. He turned slowly, and our faces were too close. I could feel the warmth radiating off his skin, saw the way his eyes flickered down to my mouth and back. Again, and yet nothing happened. Not here. Not now. Instead, we stepped away from each other like strangers who almost collided. We paid and left, bags in hand, walking through the parking garage in silence. The mood had shifted again, deeper, heavier, more dangerous. He opened the car door for me, and when I got in, our hands brushed, a static zap, barely a second. But it felt like fire. On the ride home, neither of us spoke. The streets passed by in a blur of gray and traffic lights. I stared straight ahead, heart thrumming low and steady. When we pulled into the driveway, he cut the engine but didn't get out. "I shouldn't have asked you to come," he said, voice quiet. "You didn't ask?" I said yes, I replied. That was all. That was everything. Inside the house, my husband greeted us with the same familiar warmth, asked if we found anything. I smiled, held up the bags, pretended. The day had been uneventful. He kissed my temple and walked into the kitchen. I stood in the hallway, coat still on, shoes wet from slush, and felt like someone returning from a place no one knew she'd visited. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked the same, but something had shifted behind the eyes. The silence between us was no longer just silence. It was a decision waiting to happen, and he was still outside, sitting in the car, still not coming. In, still letting me choose. He didn't come inside right away. I heard the front door an hour later, the quiet shuffle of steps that moved past the kitchen and straight to the guest room. No words, no glances. Just a shift in the atmosphere, like someone had unplugged the power but the warmth still hung in the air, waiting to burn out. Later that evening, my husband brought it up. Casual, almost cheerful, a new property near the lake, something he wanted to sell. "You're better with the paperwork," he said, "and he can take the photos. He's got a good eye." He spoke like he was solving a puzzle, like he was bringing his family together for something practical. I nodded, smiled even, but something cold slithered beneath my ribs. It wasn't the trip I feared. It was how much I wanted it. We left the next morning, just the two of us. The road stretched out in silence, and neither of us rushed to fill it. He drove like he had nowhere to be, the slow hum of tires on wet pavement masking everything we didn't say. Snow lined the shoulders of the road, white fields blinking past in flashes, but my focus was inside the car, on his fingers near the gear shift, resting just close enough to feel. That simple proximity pulsed louder than any conversation could. The hotel was old, tucked behind rows of pine trees, with dark wooden panels and dim lamps that made the lobby glow like something out of time. We checked into separate rooms, of course, that was expected. We didn't speak more than necessary, but the silence was alive. It moved with us, between us. Inside my room, I didn't unpack. I went straight to the balcony, pulling the door open. To let in the icy air, it hit me sharp in the chest. Bracing and real, I stayed there, barefoot on the cold tile, wearing only my underthings and a hotel robe I hadn't bothered to tie. The sash hung loose at my sides, like a decision I hadn't made yet. He came in without knocking. Slowly. Quietly. His voice was low, like it didn't belong in daylight. "You ever think maybe we're letting this get too real?" I didn't answer. I didn't turn. I just listened. The wind tugged at the hem of my robe. Then I turned to face him. He stood still, gaze steady. But there was a kind of restraint in his jaw, like his whole body was trying not to move too fast. The space between us evaporated in an instant. He reached for my face, not rushed, not greedy, just one hand, warm on my cheek. And then he kissed me. It wasn't careful. It wasn't polite. It was a kiss that crossed a line neither of us had drawn clearly enough. His mouth was soft, but his grip was firm. There was no hesitation in him. There wasn't any left in me either. I kissed him back. Not because I needed to know what it would feel like. I already knew. I had imagined it too many times to pretend it was curiosity. I wanted it, all of it. The fire, the danger, the terrible thrill of being wanted again. Later, I lay alone in bed, sheets cold against my legs, the memory of his touch burning under. My skin, I stared at the ceiling, the shadow of the curtain swaying across the plaster. I wasn't ashamed. I wasn't even confused. What I felt was worse, clarity. It wasn't guilt that kept me awake. It was the certainty that I wanted more. We drove back the next morning like nothing had happened. At least that's what it must have looked like to anyone watching. He drove. I stared out the window, and between us hung a silence that was too precise to be natural, not awkward, measured, as though we were both carefully folding something delicate, something we couldn't afford to break in daylight. At home, everything had been reset. The kitchen was clean, the calendar back on the fridge, my husband reading news at the table like we had never left. I kissed his cheek and made coffee while they talked about weather and fuel costs and some baseball game neither of them actually watched. I stood there, mug in hand, body wrapped in clothing too thick for the rising heat I still felt inside. Not warmth. Heat. That restless, unsettling kind that doesn't fade after one night. I tried to bury it, tried to do everything I was supposed to. I washed sheets, I ran errands, I sat across from my husband that evening and tried to make conversation. He brought up the idea of a short trip, just the two of us, to reconnect. He said with a sheepish smile, like it was something spontaneous. I nodded. I said yes, of course. And for a second, I even believed I wanted that. That night, I let him touch me. I had told myself I would try. That if I let him in again, into my skin, my space, my body, maybe something old and safe would resurface. Maybe the part of me that once reached for him in the dark would remember how. So I let him undress me slowly as he used to. I let him trail his fingers along the edge of my ribs. I even kissed his neck. The way I knew he liked, but my body felt like it was being studied. Not desired. Every movement was expected. Familiar? Yes, but lifeless. My skin didn't rise to meet his. My pulse didn't race. I closed my eyes and tried to focus on the rhythm, on the weight of his hand, on the shape of his breath. But nothing happened inside me, not even discomfort, just stillness. After, he fell asleep almost instantly, curled toward me with the comfort of routine. I lay beside him, eyes wide open, staring at the faint crack in the ceiling paint. I felt empty in a way I couldn't define. Not hollow, not sad, just absent, as if I had stepped outside my own body and left it to perform something it no longer believed in. In the bathroom, I stood under cold water, hoping to wash away the sense of having faked something intimate. My skin burned where it had been touched, but not with pleasure, with the ache of dissonance. My reflection in the mirror looked the same mouth, same eyes, same careful arrangement of hair, but behind the face was a woman no longer trying to repair what wasn't broken, just misaligned. In the hallway, I passed his door, the guest room. I hesitated. 1 second, 2, then I kept walking, not because I didn't want to knock, but because I already knew what I'd find if I did. The morning came heavy, not loud, not chaotic, just weighed down by the silence that had thickened overnight. I moved through the kitchen on autopilot, my robe drawn tightly around me though the house was warm. I made coffee without tasting it, my body tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. My husband had already left for the gym. The absence of his voice gave the house a strange echo. Like the walls were listening instead of holding, I heard the back door open, snowflakes fluttered in, carried by a gust of cold air. He stepped inside, flushed from the wind, scarf loose around his neck, jacket unzipped. His breath came in little clouds as he rubbed his hands together. "You're up early," he said, voice low. I nodded, not trusting my own. I handed him a mug, our fingers brushing slightly. Deliberate. Or not, I couldn't tell. The heat from the ceramic passed between us like current. We stood there, facing the sink. The refrigerator hummed the only sound in the room. I sensed his eyes flicking toward me, and when I turned my head, he didn't. "Look away." "You keep pretending nothing happened," he said softly. "But I see the way you move now, the way you get dressed in the mornings." His voice wasn't accusing. It was factual. Like he was reading a line from a page I didn't know I'd written. I didn't answer. What could I say? That I had started choosing my underwear based on who might see it instead of who used to. That every hemline, every fabric was a message, a signal I no longer had the luxury of denying. He left his cup on the counter, then turned and walked toward the stairs. Halfway up, he paused and glanced back. I should have looked away. I didn't. That would have been the end of it. Just another morning etched in quiet tension. If not, for the faint vibration that came minutes later, I was tidying the kitchen when I noticed his phone, forgotten on the table. The screen lit up with a soft buzz. Just a notification, a message, a reminder. But then it happened again, and again. I picked it up, only to bring it to him, nothing else. That was the intention. But the screen came to life in my hand, and what stared back at me stole the breath from my chest. It was a photo of me, standing on the balcony at the lake, taken from behind, the soft fall of the robe open enough to show my silhouette in the cold light of dusk. Not provocative, not staged, just intimate, too intimate. He had taken it, he had saved it. There was no name attached to the file, no caption, no signal of threat or cruelty, only presence. He hadn't deleted it. He hadn't hidden it. And somehow that honesty struck deeper than any confession. I placed the phone back down as if it burned. He came back into the kitchen seconds later. I didn't speak. Neither did he. His eyes dropped to the phone, then met mine. Nothing was said, but everything was understood. There was no running now, no explaining away the moment in the guest room, or the night at the lake, or the kiss that had left its shape on my mouth like bruised fruit. He had held on to something I thought would dissolve in memory, and I wasn't afraid of that. I was afraid of how much I wanted him to hold more. That night, the house was silent in a way that made every floorboard creak feel deliberate. I went to bed earlier than usual, not because I was tired, but because I couldn't stand the way the air clung to me in the living room. My husband was finishing a late call in his office, and I didn't wait up. I brushed my teeth slowly, removed my makeup in dim light, and slipped into bed wearing the most neutral nightgown I owned. No silk, no lace, just cotton, loose and safe. But I didn't sleep. Not even close. Around midnight, I heard movement, a door closing softly, not mine. I got up quietly, not out of impulse, but out of a kind of pull. I couldn't keep reasoning away. The hallway was dim, lit only by the soft blue hue of the thermostat on the wall. I walked slowly, barefoot, every step deliberate. I didn't knock. His door was open. He sat on the edge of the bed, shirtless, phone resting beside him, gaze lost somewhere between the floor and his own breath. When he saw me, he didn't move. He didn't speak. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The sound of it clicking into place felt final. He stood. Not quickly, not with surprise. Just rose like he'd been waiting for me without daring. To expect it, I moved toward him. No words, no questions. My hand found his chest first. Warm, steady. His fingers touched my wrist. He didn't guide. He just held. I lay beside him, fully clothed, fully awake, and completely undone. He didn't touch me the way he had that night on the balcony. There was no hunger in the movement, just weight. His arm wrapped around my ribs like he was trying to keep me from floating away, my face tucked against the curve of his shoulder, and we breathed in rhythm, both of us pretending sleep might find us like this. In the dark, I whispered one sentence. He asked me last night if I'm happy. He didn't respond, but I felt the breath catch in his chest. I wanted to lie. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say I didn't know. But all I could do was close my eyes tighter, pressing my cheek into his skin like it might absorb the truth I wasn't ready to say aloud. At dawn, I left before the sun finished rising. I slipped out as quietly as I had come, back into my room, back into the life that still looked the same. On the outside, we ate breakfast together, all three of us, like nothing had shifted. My husband poured orange juice, made comments about the weather, scrolled on his phone. He asked if anyone had plans for the day. I said I might run to the market. His son said he'd probably work on his laptop in the guest room. The table was set. The coffee was fresh. The silence between words was just wide enough to drown in, but under the table, my legs brushed against his, and neither of us moved. The days that followed stretched thin like overused fabric, still holding shape, but barely. We moved around each other with caution that didn't exist before. Every look, every casual gesture carried weight it shouldn't. My husband remained blissfully unaware, wrapped in the routines that kept him feeling safe. He talked about a new project at work, a transfer opportunity in another city. It could be good, he said, swirling wine in a glass like the decision was already made. New start. Better. Pay. Fresh air. He said we'd go together, all three of us at first, to settle in. I nodded. I always did. It was easier that way, but inside, something twisted. That night, I found him, his son, on the porch, smoking in the dark, barely visible under the low flicker of the backyard light. He hadn't smoked when he first came. I didn't say anything about it. He looked at me for a long time before speaking. If I stay, I'll keep touching you, he said. I don't know how not to. The honesty in his voice didn't shock me. It leveled me. I should have told him to stop, that it was over, that whatever it had been, it was a mistake. But nothing about what had happened felt accidental anymore. It felt inevitable. We hadn't broken anything. We had found something no one else had noticed was missing. I didn't answer him. Not with words. I just looked at him and let that silence mean yes. No. Maybe. All at once. He packed the next day. Quietly. No ceremony. No sudden drama. He told. My husband, he needed to get back to the city. Job stuff. Timing. Logistics. My husband patted his back, called it good timing, said he was proud of how he'd handled everything lately. I stood in the doorway, hands hidden in the folds of my sweater, heartbeat sinking into my stomach. He left a few hours later. No lingering glances, no whispered promises. Just a pause on the front steps, a shared second of stillness that hummed with everything unspoken. That night, I lay beside my husband, and he talked in half-sleep about real estate prices, mourning, flights, rental cars. I stared at the ceiling. I thought of hands that knew how to touch without taking, of arms that held me without needing to explain. A week later, I stood at the train station with a suitcase in one hand and a quiet pounding in my chest. My husband had left early to meet a realtor in the new city. I said I'd follow tomorrow. I didn't say I was taking the morning train alone or that I wasn't sure where I was going anymore. He stood on the platform, his back to the tracks, waiting. He didn't know if I'd come. I didn't know what I'd say if I did. When he saw me, his eyes didn't widen. He didn't move toward me. He just waited. I stopped several feet away, my suitcase beside me, my hands shaking inside my coat pockets. The train arrived. The doors opened. He turned to step inside. I didn't follow. He didn't look back. And I stood there, still as stone, while the train pulled away. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I just stood in the wind, with hair whipping around my face and silence settling into my bones. There's no clean end to a story like this. No moment, where everything collapses into clarity, only the sharp truth that sometimes what feels right doesn't fit, and what fits can leave you hollow. But I know this much. He touched a part of me I thought was long gone, and now I can't go back to pretending it never woke up.